Hello everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Can you see my screen? Okay. So everybody can see the screen being shared, and you can hear me. So, all right. Guess we'll get started. So, this is the second information session for the semester-long game project. Attendance is mandatory, so I appreciate you all taking your time to be here. I guess a little bit about myself. I'm Jaden. I go by Yush on Discord, and I am the founder of GDYU. I founded GDYU about almost 3 years ago, and I am not the president this year, but what I am doing is trying to run this little semester-long game development experiment to see how it works out. So, onto the table of contents. I guess this presentation is going to go over what this project is, why we're doing it, how we're going to do it, and how to optimize the chances of not failing to do it. So let's start with the what. What is the semester-long project? Well, multiple groups of members are each going to work on making a game project throughout the period of one semester. So development will take place from around September 23rd to December 23rd, which is 14 weeks. These start and end dates are subject to change. Projects can be led by members or executives, and there will be bi-weekly check-ins and milestones that will need to be accomplished. And feel free to type in the workspace chat if you have any questions throughout the presentation. Right. On to the why. Why organize something like this? Well, you all wanted something like this because in the GDYU census, long-form collaborative game development projects were something that a lot of people requested. Other clubs have tried doing something like this, but it's generally proven unsuccessful. And we've done a lot of reflecting as to why that tends to be the case. So we're going to try to take a measured, pragmatic, and practical approach to making games and organizing these game development projects to try and ensure that they get finished. So on to how to participate in the semester-long game development project. The first step is to attend one of the two information sessions. This is the event that you're at right now, so you're already ahead with the curve on that. It'll give you important information on how we're organizing the projects and what you'd be expected to do, as well as tips on managing a game development project. Participation in this is mandatory, so I'm happy you're all here, and afterwards I will be releasing a attendance sheet. It's all the same information that everybody yesterday filled out. I think it's just your name, your student email, and your student number, so that we know that you attended. It's for not only to make sure that you attended this, but also for making to write down who attends our workshops for like club management stuff. Anyway, after these information sessions have been released, we're going to send out an interest form. The interest form indicates that you're interested in participating. These will be released after both information sessions, so after this one we'll be releasing it, and we'd like you to provide information like your existing game development experience, skills you can contribute to a project, how much time you have available to give a project, and if you have a project idea that you'd like to pitch at pitch night. This interest form should be filled out before pitch night. Now, what is pitch night? Pitch night is September 16th from 2:30 to 4:30. This is the pitch sharing and team forming event. If you filled out the form, please attend. This is where you're going to share the ideas for games that you'd potentially like to make. If you listed that you have a game that you'd like to pitch at pitch night, then please share a short presentation of about 5 minutes where you try to sell your idea to everybody else at pitch night. Even if you don't have a very solid idea for a game, half-baked ideas are great because you can collaborate and have your group come up with a solid idea together. If you have a project that's quite early in development that you'd still like to pitch, you can show what you've made so far as well. And after all the pitches have been done, you can hang out and try to form a team with other people. Right. Now that you have a team and a solid enough game idea, you're going to write your design doc. Right. This is a design document for your game. We give you a template that you can follow. It's a fairly simple design document. Most of the questions are pretty simple about the content of your game. We'll spend the weekend going over the submitted documents and providing feedback, and development will begin on the 23rd. All right. So now that development is underway, we will have our bi-weekly check-ins. The first bi-weekly check-in will be 1 week after the start date, September 30th, and then every other Monday after that. At these check-ins, we'll go over how your previous 2 weeks went, what your goals are for the next 2 weeks, and any changes or adjustments you feel would help with your project being completed. We also encourage you to post public devlogs in the GDYU Discord server, and these meetings will continue until the end of development time. And after your project is finished, we will have the showcase and postmortem, where you're able to show off what you made at our next games showcase. Our current games showcase is September 27th, so your games won't be done by that time, but next semester's game showcase you'll be able to show what you've made. You can put together a presentation talking about development, what you learned, and what you'll take away from your next projects. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the workspace chat and I'll answer them. But on to the second part of this project, which is just general tips on managing game development projects. I'd say the first thing that I want to communicate with you and your expectations for what you'll be able to make in this semester-long project is that games take time and resources and like skill and money and time, and as hobbyist students we don't really have much of any of those things to give to the games that we'd like to make. And even games that GDYU club members consider small, like A Short Hike, still did take 4 months of full-time development with funding from a publisher. So I guess the one thing that I want to communicate immediately is to temper your expectations. There is a chance that these projects will not get finished, and I'm not saying that to discourage you, but I'm saying that to prepare you, because you can finish these projects if you strategize correctly and understand and have a reasonable scope. You'll be able to finish these projects because projects get finished all the time. If you look at this chart, there was over 12,000 games released on Steam last year, and that's a lot of games. That's about 33 games every day getting finished. And even if you're not releasing your game on Steam, if we look to the level of hobbyists like us, there are more people than ever participating in game jams and development competitions. And these are hobbyists like us who are able to finish their projects. And because of innovations in programming languages and game engines and learning resources, it's never been easier or more accessible to make a video game compared to right now. So I guess, but I'm sure most of us have abandoned a majority of the game development projects that we've went and tried to make. So sometimes it feels like everybody can make a game except for us. And I guess the two primary factors that influence if your game is going to be able to be finished or not is the scope being too big or the motivation being too low. Let's start with scope. What determines how big or small or complicated your game is? Well, scope can be separated into two separate kinds of work that you do for your game. There's content and complexity. The content of your game is simply how much stuff your game has. It's the levels, assets, and resources that you will need to make the things that the player will play. The complexity of your game is how complicated the systems in your game are. It's what your content is built upon. Some games have low content and high complexity, and some games have high content and low complexity. I'd say two good examples of either one are Rogue and Celeste. Rogue is a very high complexity game because it's an entire RPG with procedural generation, but it's pretty low content because after you set up all of the systems, it doesn't really take that much content for the game to be able to just make itself. That's why roguelikes are such a popular genre among indie developers because it maximizes the amount of content that you're able to make because the game effectively makes itself. Celeste, on the other hand, is a low complexity, high content game. The character controller for Madeline probably could be made in about 15 minutes. The vast majority of development time on Celeste was spent making each level and designing them and giving them interesting gimmicks and things that you can do to apply the relatively simple movement controller in interesting and innovative ways. Right. So if anybody has any questions, make sure you can just post them in Workspace, whatever, and I'll answer. Okay. So now that we understand the difference between content and complexity, I guess we still need to answer how big should your game be? Well, that's based on the resources that you have, like the time you can commit, the money that you can commit, and the skills that you already have in making games. These are hard to estimate because humans are bad at non-comparative estimates, so always err on the side of caution. Don't be ambitious. Pick something that you're confident that you can make and in less time than your deadline. It's better to add more to a smaller idea than take away from a bigger one. That and smaller games are much easier to scope. It's way easier for you to figure out how much resources you'll have for the next 2 days compared to the amount of resources that you'll have for the next 2 years. As you get experience with scoping smaller projects, it becomes easier to then scope larger and larger projects because you have an idea of how long things take. This is why the project is 1 semester long instead of 2. Most people actually preferred to do a 2-semester long project, but we felt that keeping the scope as smaller would lead to a higher chance of the projects being finished. And even though a semester is not a lot of time, the game that you make for this semester doesn't have to be the end for the game that you choose to make this semester. Because I also ran into the idea of finishing your game every 3 months, which is conceptually to make smaller versions of a project, finished smaller versions of a project that could be released if you feel like, but could also be expanded into larger versions later. You don't have to throw away your ambitious dream game idea, but what we're doing is we're starting as small as possible to maximize the possibility of a larger, more ambitious version existing later. Because it's better to make a small finished version of your game and then expand that to a big finished version of your game than try to make the big finished version from the beginning and not actually release anything. Because in these smaller versions of the game aren't demos or proof of concepts or vertical slices. They're still finished projects that you can release if you realize that you don't have the resources to make the larger version. But if you still do want to continue working on the game, it can be expanded later on. And finishing your games every 3 months is also a valuable sort of thinking pattern to put yourself into, because it makes sure that you are always considering what is most important about your game. Because for a semester-long game development project, you don't have time for the parts of the game that don't matter. I guess I like this quote from Derek Yu, creator of Spelunky. The fact is, if we all had unlimited resources and unlimited time, we'd all make the same crappy, meandering everything game, and there'd be no reason to play at all. It's our limited resources and time that force us to make tight games that feel like they have a purpose. If you've been building upon some core concepts that are provably fun, just keep cutting until you get to the very edge of that core. Everything else is probably just fluff you could do without, or worse, it's fluff that's preventing people from seeing the best parts of your game. Because you don't want to have a bunch of fluff in your game that keeps the important parts away from the player. And because development obviously takes so many resources, you want to make sure that everything that you're doing is important for your game. Because the most important part that I want to get across is that we need to finish these games, right? All right, on to motivation. I also like this quote from Derek Yu of, "A lot of game making is tedious and downright unfun. At some point, you'll realize that there's all this stuff you never thought about when you were planning your project and prototyping. Stuff like menus, screen transitions, saving and loading. Shoot, I was imagining this amazing world I was going to create or this fun mechanic I was going to experiment with. I didn't think I'd be spending weeks making functional menus that don't look like crap, right? And I think I like this quote because it sort of emphasizes that we can't make your game for you. I guess the deadline and the recognition from the club could act as external motivation, but a majority of the motivation that you're going to have in order to work on these projects is intrinsic. We tried to optimize the format of this project to maximize the amount of motivation and project ownership that people feel. That's why we opted for individual projects over one large group project, and that's why we picked having a loose collaborative pitch night so that your team can try to form a game idea together instead of you having a existing design document that you're simply trying to find people to help make, in order for it to feel more like your group's project instead of just a group of people working on one person's project. The reason ownership is important is because when you feel like you are valuable and important to the project, and the project is something that you want made, then you'll hopefully be able to trudge through the unglamorous work that needs to happen to finish it. Right. And I guess just some general project management tips in order to just help development go smoothly. Go into Discord VC to work on your game. You don't actually need to like stream your screen or have your mic on, but just seeing that you're inside of VC working would help peer pressure your teammates into working as well. Delegate roles and minimize confusion on who's responsible for what. This helps make people feel responsible, which aids in project ownership. Have a team of no more than 5 people, because with a game that's this small, you probably won't, and you won't really have any productivity benefit from no more than 5 people. You'd just be dealing with the overhead of trying to manage that many people. You can use a Kanban board to keep everyone on track. You can use Trello, or there's also GitHub projects. That one works fine as well. Try to make your tasks as small and specific as possible. The task of implement acceleration is better than make platformer character controller, which is generally pretty vague. The 2-week meetings can act as the beginning and ends of sprints, if that's how you'd like to organize your productivity, and to work hard and have fun, because games are hard work, but it's work worth doing. All right, now we're going to get into the stages of indie hobbyist game development. Again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to post them in Workspace, and I'll be able to answer. All right, so the general stages of indie hobbyist game development are the brainstorming, game design document, playable game, the horizontal slice, the vertical slice, the content phase, the polishing phase, and then shipping the game. All right, so starting with brainstorming, right? I guess you think some things you should consider are: what are your goals for this project? What are your constraints? What is your game's audience? Who is this game for? If the answer could just be you, if this is just a game that you want to have, that's perfectly reasonable. Do you have something personal to express through your game's ideas? Why should this game exist? Can you play a version of the game in your head? You most likely have an existing idea that you've been conceptualizing already. I know a lot of game developers have game ideas that are running through their heads all the time, so you can just bring that to pitch night. You can also continue to brainstorm with your team after pitch night and with whatever game project you had come up with. Okay, next is the game design document. This is a document that outlines the design of your game. It puts abstract ideas into concrete words. You won't have all the correct answers or know what the most fun things in your game would be, because, well, it's hard to tell how fun something is on paper. But you need to have a core gameplay loop established, even if it's not the final one that you're going to go with. A core gameplay loop can be represented as a diagram of the states that your game exists in and the things and the sort of verbs that your player would be doing. For example, this is the core loop of tennis, of player serves ball, player returns ball, opponent returns ball, and then I guess the game, player serving and player returning and opponent returning loops forever until either opponent fails to return ball or there's a fault, or player fails to return ball or there's a fault. So you'll be required to create a core loop diagram of whatever game you're coming up with. Right. The next step is the first playable version. It's important to have a playable version of your game as soon as possible, especially for games this small. The first playable version will sort of help you figure out if the game idea that you had, I guess, is fun and makes sense and is actually as good as you thought it'd be. Although for these projects, we're more interested not in making fun games or good games, but in just making finished games. Because we can worry about how fun our games are or marketing our games so that people can find them after we're able to actually finish our projects. Because it doesn't matter how fun your game is if it doesn't exist. Right. After that, we have the horizontal slice. This is the completed complexity with the minimum amount of content needed to test it. All your game's fundamental systems are in place. Right after the horizontal slice, you have the vertical slice. This is a version of your game that has a sample of everything that will be in the final version. You can think of this as a cake slice. I have a photo of a cake on the slide, and I guess each one of the layers you can sort of represent as one of the things in your game. So it's not the entire cake, but it is a slice that gives you a little piece of all of the different things that are in your game. So that's the vertical slice. After that, we have the content phase. This is the things that your player will use your systems within. These are the levels or missions or quests or however you divide up gameplay in your game. And I guess you need to make the levels, make the assets that the levels need, and set up the systems that those assets rely on. And then finally, you can work on the polishing phase, which is just to clean up the game, improve the things that you have time to improve, deal with any bugs that are present and easy to fix. And after that, you're able to release. And that's always a good feeling, and it's a feeling that most game developers don't get to feel often enough because we don't finish our projects. And that's about it. So thank you all for attending. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in Workspace. I guess shortly after this, we will be releasing the interest form, so stay tuned for that. You're all on Discord, so I know I can just post it on Discord and you'll all get it. So yeah,